Hey guys, welcome back. So as I mentioned yesterday, if we were to break up the Sermon on the Mount into three sections, the first section would be Jesus describes the DNA of a Christian. The bulk of the sermon is he's describing what a Christian looks like in the world, and the ending would be those illustrations, the rich and the foolish builders, why it's imperative that we follow him. And I want to go back to that first section again, the DNA of a Christian, who a Christian is. We talked about yesterday how Jesus calls us back to remember who we are in him, that he has remade us. But the ending of that section in verses 17 to 20, if you want to pause it and reread that, 17 to 20, Jesus is calling us to remember who he is. A lot of people throughout history have come out to say that they really appreciate what Jesus teaches. That they love when he says, love your enemies and go the extra mile, right? And we are all in the right to be in awe of those things. Those are great things. But Jesus thought of himself as more than just a teacher. And it would be a failure if we were to look at this and think of him as just a mere teacher. He does not think of himself as just a mere teacher. If you read these verses, 17 to 20 in chapter 5, it's clear that Jesus does not think he is just a simple teacher like a lot of the world has pinned him as. He knows that he's more than that he's more. If you read 17, he says, I have come to fulfill the law. He said explicitly that he came to fulfill righteousness, not just talk about it. And that's kind of a throwback to verses 10 and 11 in chapter 5 when he says, blessed are those who are persecuted on my account. Right, he's putting himself in that position of being the center of attention because he's the only one that deserves it. He says that he's upholding the law as good, and that's a good thing. But then he even says that the Pharisees, they don't even do enough. If you read in verse 20, he's holding himself as above the law, as above righteousness, because he is the very person that defines what righteousness means. Jesus defines what righteousness is. I think that's a great point from this section, is that if we were to remember who Jesus is, he defines what it means to be good. He defines what righteousness is. So if Jesus defines righteousness, that means following him is infinitely better than following anyone or anything else. And he's calling people past just doing good things. Right? He calls the Pharisees out and says, you need to be doing even more than them. The Pharisees in that time were the very people doing everything they thought the law required. So he's calling us to not just do things that we think are good, to not just follow codes that we think are good, but to follow the very person, the very being that defines what good means. Think of it like this. Would you rather have a bottle of sand from your favorite beach, or would you rather be on your favorite beach? Right? Sand is good. It reminds us of a beautiful beach, but it's always better to be on the beach. So following Jesus is infinitely better than following anything or anyone else. He defines what goodness and righteousness even means in the first place. So I want to give you guys a question to talk about. Call someone, go on Zoom or wherever, and discuss and consider this question. How are you treating Jesus like a mere teacher rather than the Lord and Savior? How often do we just treat him like he's just giving us rules to follow rather than calling us to a flourishing life following him, living alongside him and living into the mission that he invites us into? So how are you and how do you frequently treat Jesus like a mere teacher rather than Lord and Savior? I hope this was a blessing to you as we are called to remember who Jesus really is.